The flowers were not for her. She knew it before she finished reading the card. Maybe she knew it before she opened the door. Maybe she had known for 8 months. The way you know things you are not ready to name in the body first. In the specific atmospheric shift of a marriage losing pressure, and only later in the mind where the naming happens. Zora Banks had been married to Shin Jae-wook for 6 years. She had moved from Atlanta to Seoul for him. She had learned his language properly, fluently, with the kind of dedication that people only bring to things they have decided matter. She had learned his family's rhythms, their preferences, the specific geography of their expectations. She had become, through 6 years of patient, precise work, exactly the daughter-in-law that the Shin family required. Not the one they wanted. They had wanted a Korean woman from a connected family and had communicated this preference before the wedding and after it and at every family dinner in between. But Zora had become what was required: gracious, deferential, present at every obligation, patient with every condescension, while quietly being something else entirely in the spaces between. She was not the woman they thought they had married into the family. She had never been. She arranged the white peonies in the entry hall vase. She straightened them until they were perfect. Then she put the kettle on and she sat at the kitchen table, and she called the one person she trusted completely. Diana picked up on the second ring. "It happened," Zora said. "The flowers?" Diana said. "The flowers." A pause. "How are you?" "I'm fine," Zora said. "I need us to move faster." "How much faster?" "I want to be ready in 18 months. Diana was quiet for 3 seconds. "That's aggressive." "I know. We'll need to move on the property by Q2. "Then we move on the property by Q2, Zora said. "Okay," Diana said. "I'll call Attorney Park in the morning." "Good," Zora said. "Don't call from your office phone." She ended the call. She made her tea. She went upstairs and stood in the doorway between her children's rooms. Samuel, at 7, sprawled across his bed with his arm around the stuffed bear he refused to admit he still slept with. Grace, at 5, with her hair across the pillow like a question mark. She stood there for a long time. Then she went back downstairs, sat at her kitchen table, and opened the document she had been building for 4 months. She started working. This is the moment everything changes. And if you are watching this right now and you already feel it, if you felt something in that doorway, in those arranged flowers, subscribe to Afro-Korean Folktales right now. Because what Zora builds over the next 18 months is going to make your jaw drop. This channel is built for stories exactly like this one. Subscribe, keep watching. We are nowhere near done. 6 years earlier, Zora Banks had been standing in front of a classroom in Atlanta when she understood that she was the kind of teacher students remembered. Not because she was entertaining, because she made them feel like the books she taught had been written specifically for their lives, which was the thing that separated literature from entertainment, and the thing she had believed in since she was 9 years old, reading her mother's copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God in a single afternoon. She had met Shin Jae-wook at a conference in New York. He was in America on business. She was presenting a paper on post-colonial literature to an audience of 4 people, one of whom was him. He found her afterward in the corridor and said her presentation was the most interesting thing he had heard in 2 years. He said it the way people say true things directly, without the cushioning that compliments usually require. They were married 14 months later. She knew, walking into the Shin family home for the first time, that she was going to have to be twice as good and appear half as threatening. She had known this before she landed in Seoul. She had been preparing for it the way she prepared for everything, by understanding it completely before it arrived. Madam Shin was 63 and had built the family's social position through 40 years of strategic alliance and the specific ruthlessness of a woman who grew up with nothing and had decided that nothing would ever be allowed near her family again. She looked at Zora at their first meeting with the assessment of someone identifying a problem they intend to manage. She had been managing Zora for 6 years. She had no idea she was the one being managed. The first crack appeared 18 months before the flowers. Not dramatically, not with a confrontation or a revelation, or any of the moments that people imagine betrayal announces itself through. It announced itself the way pressure loss announces itself in a sealed room, slowly, atmospherically, through the specific quality of the air before anything visible changes. Jae-wook started coming home later. Not much later. 30 minutes. Sometimes an hour. The kind of lateness that has an explanation ready before you ask for one, which meant the explanation had been prepared, which meant the lateness was not accidental. Zora did not ask. She watched. He changed how he held his phone. Not hiding it, he was too careful for hiding. Just repositioning it slightly when she entered a room. The kind of adjustment that looks like habit and is actually calculation. She noticed. She said nothing. 8 months before the flowers, the cologne reappeared. He had worn it when they first met, stopped wearing it 3 years into the marriage in the slow withdrawal from intimacy that happens when a man has decided something about a relationship but has not yet decided to say it out loud. She had noticed when it disappeared. She noticed more when it came back. He was wearing it again for someone else. She noticed. She said nothing. She opened a document on her personal laptop, the one Jae-wook did not know about, purchased with cash from a shop in Mapo, and registered to an email address that had never touched their shared network. She titled the document simply, After. She began filling it. Diana Park had been Zora's closest friend for 4 years. They had met at a Seoul expat networking event that neither of them had wanted to attend and had found themselves in the corner together within 20 minutes, making quiet observations about the room until the evening became more interesting than it had started. Diana was a financial analyst, 12 years in Seoul. She had watched money move through families and corporations with the specific attention of someone who understood that money was never just money. It was always also power, leverage, access, and the thing that determined who got to leave and who had to stay. She had been watching Zora's situation for 2 years before the flowers arrived. She had been ready for the call longer than Zora knew. They met the morning after the flowers at a cafe in Mapo that neither of them had been to before. Diana arrived first. She had a folder on the table when Zora sat down. Translation work, Diana said, without preamble. You speak 4 languages. There is a legal translation firm, fully remote, invoiced through a private account. Madam Shin's household monitoring cannot reach it. How much per month? Zora said. Diana told her. Zora looked at the number. That's not enough. No, Diana said. But it is the beginning, and the beginning is what we need. She turned a page. There is a biotech company, pre-IPO. I have been tracking it for 18 months. The science is genuine, and the market has not understood it yet. If we enter in the next 60 days, entry cost? 40,000. I have 38, Zora said. I have 2, Diana said. She looked at Zora across the table. We go in together. Zora looked at her, at the woman who was putting her own money and her professional credibility and her name into a plan that would make one of Seoul's most powerful families her enemy if it was ever discovered. Why? Zora said. Diana looked back at her steadily. My mother stayed in a situation she could have left if one person had helped her build the door. I decided a long time ago I was not going to watch that happen to someone I loved without doing something about it. They did not make speeches. They did not hug. They ordered more coffee, and they worked for 3 more hours. The translation work began generating income in the 3rd week. Zora worked between midnight and 3 in the morning at the kitchen table after Jae-wook was asleep or absent. She invoiced through the private account. She transferred income to a bank with no connection to the Shin family's financial network. She kept records of everything dated, sourced, clean. 6 months in, she met attorney Park Ji-young. Attorney Park was 44 and had spent 20 years in family law watching powerful families use financial complexity as a weapon in divorce. She had a way of listening to clients that communicated she had heard worse and was not surprised and was already thinking about what to do. She listened to Zora's situation for 40 minutes without writing anything down. Then she picked up her pen. Asset protection first, she said. Everything you build needs to be legally yours before any divorce proceedings begin. If it enters those proceedings as marital property, we lose the ability to protect it cleanly. How do we structure it? Zora said. Attorney Park turned a legal pad toward her. Like this, she said. Zora looked at the structure. She looked at Attorney Park. "How long have you been waiting for a case like this?" she said. Attorney Park almost smiled. "Long enough," she said. "Do not go anywhere. What Madam Shin does when she starts to sense something is wrong will make your blood run cold. And what Zora does in response is the moment this story becomes something you will not forget. Like this video right now if you can feel where this is heading. Every like pushes this story to someone who needs it. Hit it, keep watching." The biotech IPO was announced on a Thursday morning in November. Zora was making school lunches when her phone lit up. She read the number. She set the phone face down on the counter. She finished making the lunches. She packed the bags. She walked Samuel and Grace to the school bus and watched it pull away and waved at Grace's face in the window. Then she walked back inside the house and she sat at the kitchen table and she picked up the phone and she looked at the number again. The 40,000 had become 612,000 in 14 months. She transferred it through 3 accounts in sequence the way Attorney Park had shown her. By the time it arrived where it needed to be, it was clean, and it was hers, and nobody in the Shin family's financial network could touch it. She opened her laptop. She updated the document titled After. She made herself another coffee. She went to work. 14 months into Zora's building, Madam Shin hired a private investigator. Zora did not know immediately. She found out through the most ordinary possible mechanism. She overheard a phone call. She had been in the garden the afternoon it happened, deadheading the roses that lined the south wall of the Shin residence, a task she had taken on 18 months ago because it put her outside for an hour 3 times a week in a way that looked domestic and gave her phone signal away from the house's internal monitoring. Madam Shin's study window was above the garden. The window was open because Madam Shin preferred air circulation to privacy when she believed herself to be alone. Zora heard the name of the investigation firm. She heard the instructions: general surveillance, financial activity, any patterns of behavior that were inconsistent with the profile of a dependent housewife managing a household of 4. She went on deadheading the roses. She did not change her pace. She did not look up at the window. She finished the row she was working on. She collected her tools. She went inside and washed her hands and started preparing dinner. That evening, she called Attorney Park from the cafe in Mapo. "She hired someone," Zora said. Silence for 2 seconds. "When?" "The call was this afternoon. I heard the briefing." "What firm?" Zora told her. Attorney Park was quiet for a moment. "I know them," she said. "They are thorough. How clean is your current trail?" "Clean," Zora said. "Everything is routed the way you showed me." "The property accounts?" "Registered to the holding structure. Nothing connects back to me directly." "The translation income?" 3 layers between the invoicing and the final account. I checked last week." Attorney Park was quiet again. "Then the investigator will find a woman who manages a household and occasionally tutors language students for modest income, which is exactly what we want them to find." "Yes," Zora said. "Don't change anything," Attorney Park said. "The worst thing you can do is change your behavior now. That is what surveillance looks for." "I know," Zora said. "I'm not going to change anything." She went home. She made breakfast for Samuel and Grace the next morning. She attended a Shin family lunch that Sunday with her usual composure. She smiled at Madam Shin across the table with the specific warmth of a daughter-in-law who had nothing to hide. She had everything to hide. She hid it perfectly. The investigator ran surveillance for 3 months. The report, when it arrived on Madam Shin's desk, contained nothing actionable. A woman who tutored language students remotely, maintained the household, attended to her children, and had no financial activity of note beyond normal household expenditure. Madam Shin dismissed the investigator. She did not stop watching. But she stopped watching professionally, which meant she was watching with her own eyes again, which meant she was seeing what Zora had always shown her, exactly what she expected to see. The property closed on a Wednesday in April. Zora found out through Attorney Park's office a text message containing a single word: confirmed. She was at Samuel's school sports day when it arrived. She was sitting on the grass watching him run the 100-meter race, Grace beside her with her hand in the popcorn bag they had brought, the afternoon light, the specific warm gold of a Soul Spring that had arrived early and felt like a gift. She read the word. She put her phone back in her pocket. Samuel came third in the race. He ran to her immediately after, slightly winded, wanting to know if she had seen. She told him she had seen every second. He asked if she was proud. She said she was always proud. He accepted this and ran back to his friends. Grace took another handful of popcorn. Zora looked at the afternoon light on the sports field. The property was a four-bedroom house in a quiet residential area of Seongbuk-dong, purchased through the holding structure Attorney Park had built, legally, completely, and irrevocably Zora's. The mortgage serviced through investment returns that Jae-wook did not know existed. The title registered in a name that was hers before she ever became a Shin and would be hers long after. The $40 million valuation that the property would carry 18 months later was not visible yet, but the structure was in place. The foundation was solid. And Zora had learned enough about the Seoul property market in 2 years of midnight research to understand exactly what she had purchased and what it was going to become. She had built a door. Now she waited for Jae-wook to open it. She did not wait long. 3 months after the property closed, Jae-wook came home on a Friday evening with the specific quality of a man who has been preparing something. She recognized it immediately, the overcomposed face, the deliberate way he set down his bag, the fact that he came to find her rather than going to his study. He sat across from her at the kitchen table. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Okay," she said. She set down what she was reading. She looked at him. He said the things people say in this moment, that the marriage had not been what either of them needed for a long time, that he had been unhappy, that she deserved someone who could be present in a way he had not been, that he thought it was time to discuss formally separating. He said all of it with the careful language of a man who had rehearsed it and believed, having rehearsed it, that the care of the language would make it land more gently than it was going to land. He had no idea there was nowhere for it to land. The floor she had been standing on when he started speaking was not the floor he thought it was. She let him finish. She did not interrupt. She did not perform shock or grief or anger or any of the things the moment was scripted to produce in the person receiving it. When he finished, she looked at him for a moment. "Okay," she said. He blinked. "Okay?" "Yes," she said. "Okay." She picked up what she had been reading. "I'll have Attorney Park contact your legal team next week." He stared at her. "You already have an attorney." "I've had one for 2 years," she said. The kitchen was very quiet. "Zora, the children will need stability during the transition," she said. "I've already identified a school near the new property that has space in Samuel's year group and a waiting list position for Grace that should clear by September." He looked at her. "What new property?" She looked back at him. And in the specific, complete, unhurried way of someone who has been waiting for this exact question for 2 years, she told him. She did not tell him everything. She told him enough. The translation work. The investment account. The property in Seongbuk-dong purchased, titled, mortgaged, and legally structured in a way that predated any divorce proceedings by 22 months, which meant it was hers with a clarity that no Shin family lawyer was going to be able to argue around without spending more money than the argument was worth. She told him the number, the current valuation. Jae-wook sat across the kitchen table from her, and she watched his face do something she had never seen it do in 6 years of marriage. It did not collapse. He was too composed for collapse. But something behind it reconfigured. The specific reconfiguration of a man understanding, for the first time, the actual dimensions of the room he has been standing in. "How?" he said. "Carefully," she said. "For how long?" "Long enough," she said. He looked at her. She looked back at him. And in the silence between them was the full weight of 6 years, the conference in New York, the 14 months of courtship, the wedding, the move to Seoul, the Shin family dinners, Madame Shin's specific brand of hostility, the cologne that reappeared, the flowers that arrived at the wrong door, all of it compressed into this kitchen, this table, this moment where a man was discovering that the woman he had underestimated had been building something in the dark the entire time he was looking somewhere else. "The children," he started. "Are mine," she said, simply, without heat. Attorney Park has the full custody documentation. It is thorough. It accounts for residential stability, primary care history, financial provision, and educational continuity. If you want to contest it, the process will be long, and the outcome will not be different. He said nothing. "I am not trying to take them from you," she said. "I am telling you clearly that I have made sure they are protected. Whatever you decide to do next, they will be fine. I made sure of that before I made sure of anything else." The kitchen was very quiet. Jae-wook looked at his hands on the table. He looked at the room, the kitchen Zora had managed for 6 years, the house his family had expected her to be grateful to live in, the life that had been offered to her as though it were a gift and had turned out to be, in ways nobody had understood, the raw material for something entirely different. I didn't know, he said. It was the truest thing he had said to her in 2 years. I know you didn't, she said. That was the point. She stood up. She picked up her phone. She walked to the kitchen doorway and she stopped. I'll have the children's things moved by the end of the month, she said. There is no reason for this to be difficult if neither of us makes it difficult. I have no interest in making it difficult. She walked out of the kitchen. Madam Shin found out on a Monday morning. Jae Wook had gone to her that weekend. Zora did not know the details of that conversation and did not need them. What she knew was that by Monday morning, Madam Shin had called her own legal team and her own financial advisors and had spent approximately 6 hours trying to find a thread to pull that would unravel what Zora had built. There was no thread. Attorney Park had been 20 years in this field specifically because she understood how powerful families operated when they felt threatened. She had built Zora's structure to withstand exactly this examination, layered, documented, predating the divorce, legally clean from every angle that mattered. There was nothing to pull. There was nothing to challenge. There was a woman who had built a $40 million property portfolio on income she had generated independently over 2 years and protected through legitimate legal structures that had been in place long before any divorce proceedings began. Madam Shin called Zora directly on Monday afternoon. Zora let it ring twice. Then she answered. I don't understand, Madam Shin said. She had clearly been trying to find a different opening and had failed. Those 4 words were what was left. I know, Zora said. You or Madam Shin stopped. You appeared to be. Yes, Zora said. I did. The silence on the line was the silence of a woman who had spent 40 years being the most strategic person in every room she entered encountering. For the first time, someone who had been more strategic and had been doing it inside her own house without her knowing. What do you want? Madam Shin said. The question of someone who has decided to negotiate. I have what I want, Zora said. I have had it for some time. I am calling this the conclusion of a conversation that I did not begin, but am choosing to end on my own terms. She ended the call. She was sitting in the cafe in Mapo. Diana was across the table. Diana had been there for the call, not listening, just present, in the way she had been present for all of it. When Zora lowered the phone, Diana looked at her. Done? Diana said. Done, Zora said. Diana picked up her coffee. She raised it slightly across the table. Zora picked up hers. They did not make a speech. They did not need to. The move happened on a Saturday in June, a clear morning. The kind of sole June day that feels like an apology for the heat that is coming bright and cool with a light that made everything look like it was being seen for the first time. Zora had told Samuel and Grace 2 weeks earlier. Not everything. They were 7 and 5, and what they needed was not everything. It was safety and clarity and the specific reassurance that what was changing was the address and not the family, which was the 3 of them, and had always been the 3 of them in the ways that counted most. Samuel had asked if they could bring the bear. She told him they were bringing everything. Grace had asked if the new house had a garden. She told her it had a better one. They arrived at the house in Seongbuk-dong at 10 in the morning. The moving company had the furniture set up by 2. By 4 in the afternoon, Samuel had claimed his room, and Grace had already named 3 things in the garden. Zora stood in the kitchen of a house that had her name on the title and looked at the afternoon light coming through windows she had chosen and felt not triumph, not relief, not the dramatic emotional release that the moment seemed to call for. Something quieter than all of those. Something that did not have a clean name but felt like ground. The specific feeling of standing on something solid after a long time of standing on something that had been pretending to be solid. She made dinner. The 3 of them ate at a table that was theirs. Grace fell asleep at the table before dessert, and Zora carried her to her room and tucked her in and stood in the doorway the way she had stood in doorways for 7 years watching her children breathe, in the specific, sustained gratitude of a mother who has never taken a single breath of theirs for granted. Samuel was still awake when she came back to the kitchen. He was looking at the garden through the window. Mama, he said. Yes, she said. Are you okay? She looked at her son. 7 years old. The bear was on the counter behind him. He had brought it to the table for dinner and had not mentioned it, and she had not mentioned it, and this was the agreement between them about the bear. Yes, she said. I'm okay. You seem different, he said. She looked at him. Different how? He thought about it with the seriousness that 7-year-olds bring to questions they have been working on for a while. Like when you finish something hard, he said, And you didn't know how hard it was until it was done. She looked at her son for a long moment. Yes, she said, exactly like that. She kissed his forehead. She sent him to bed. She sat at the kitchen table of her own house in the quiet of a June evening with the garden visible through the window, and she opened her laptop. Not to work. Not the document titled After That Document Was Finished. She opened something new. A blank page. She sat with the blank page for a long time. Then she began to write. Not her story, she was not ready for that yet. Something else. A document about what she had learned, about financial independence and asset protection, and the specific things nobody tells women when they enter marriages in cultures that are not theirs. About translation work and pre-IPO investments, and the difference between marital property and independently generated income, and why that difference matters before you need it to matter. About how to build a door before you know you need one. She wrote for 2 hours, then she sent it to Diana. Diana responded in 12 minutes. 3 words. This is needed. 6 months later, in a small community center in Itaewon, Zora sat across from 8 women, 4 Korean, 2 Nigerian, 1 Ethiopian, 1 American, each of them in some version of the situation she had been in 3 years ago. Each of them having found her through the network that Diana had helped her build, through the document that had been shared and reshared through channels that move the way real information moves person to person, quietly, to the people who needed it most. She did not tell them to leave. She did not tell them to stay. She told them about doors, how to build them, when to build them, what they needed to build them with, and what it felt like to walk through one you had made with your own hands. She told them about Samuel asking if she was okay, about the bear on the counter, about the garden and the light and the blank page. She told them that the loudest victories were not always the ones that mattered most. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was say nothing. Watch everything. Build quietly. And when the moment came when someone handed you the opening they thought was going to end, you say, okay, just okay, and walk out. She walked home from the community center on a Tuesday evening in December, when the Seoul streets were cold and bright and moving with the specific energy of a city that does not slow down for anyone. She walked with her hands in her coat pockets and the specific, unhurried pace of someone who is not late because she is exactly where she intended to be. She thought about the flowers, the white peonies she had arranged in the entry hall vase of a house that was no longer her home, the card with someone else's name, the 4 seconds in the doorway. She thought about the kettle, the laptop, the document titled After. She thought about Samuel at the table asking if she was okay. She stopped at the corner near her street and she looked up at the December sky above Seoul, the specific dark blue of a winter evening that has not yet become night, the city lights beginning below it. She was okay. She was better than okay. She had built something that could not be taken from her. She had walked out of a life that was built on someone else's terms into one built entirely on her own. She had taken her children and her name and 40 months of midnight work and the specific, patient, devastating power of a woman who understood that silence was not weakness, but strategy, and had used it to dismantle something that had never expected to be dismantled. The Shin family had thought they knew who she was. They had never known her at all. She walked home. The lights were on. Through the window, she could see Samuel at the kitchen table doing homework. Grace's drawing was taped to the glass, a house with a garden, and 3 figures in the garden, and above them in Grace's 5-year-old handwriting, 1 word, hours. Zora looked at the word for a moment. Then she opened the door and went home. If this story did something to you tonight, if you felt Zora in that kitchen, those 4 seconds in the doorway, the way she said okay and walked out, then Afro-Korean Folktales needs your support right now. Like this video. Every single like tells YouTube this story matters, and YouTube shows it to more people who need it. Subscribe to this channel because every week we build stories exactly like this one. Stories about women who said nothing and built everything. Stories about the exits that nobody saw coming. Stories about walking through a door you made with your own hands. Subscribe right now. Drop a comment and tell us the moment that hit you hardest. Was it the flowers, the IPO, the kitchen table? Okay? Tell us. We read every single comment. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about a woman who never raised her voice and never needed to. We will see you in the next one.